Hello to everybody who is joining right now. I can see them all coming in. The numbers stacking up. Ben, welcome as always. How you doing today?
Great to be here.
Great to have you. I think this is the second time you and I have connected so far. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
The first one was regarding cash flow management and how we can go about that from a SaaS perspective. Today's a little bit different, just as interesting. So hopefully we can foster some good conversation. I see the numbers continue to grow here. We'll wait maybe a minute or two for some extra people to join. Should have around 50 to 100 today. So looking forward to that. Notice to the audience, if anybody would like to submit any questions today. If you haven't already, when you signed up, you can feel free to do that in the chat when available. And we will address as many of those as we can throughout the course of this 1 hour long webinar.
Yep, see some familiar names in the audience. Great to see you guys.
Some SaaS CFO tried and true members.
Yeah, SaaS community, SaaS metric students. So yeah, thanks for joining, guys.
Drivetrain giving a hello there.
Yeah, I'm Kirk. I'm calling in from Denver, which is home, and we're supposed to get a big snowstorm starting tonight. So we'll see. Could be 6 inches, could be 24 inches. You never know in Colorado.
I think we couldn't be more on opposite sides of the world. I am here in sunny Australia, coming off a strong winter. No, I'm kidding. There is no such thing as winter in Australia. We got a strong summer here. The last 4 days, it was 100 degrees, and that's not Celsius, that's Fahrenheit, thank goodness. It's been a good one. Okay, looks like we're ready to go here. Welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to be talking with the SaaS CFO himself, Ben Murray. We, for the background knowledge for people that don't know this, every year, Ben conducts a tech stack report. And this is to give us insights about what are the solutions that are being used across various different categories, from accounting software, by ARR size, invoicing, revenue recognition, FP&A software, metric supporting systems. There's all these different ways you can splice the system data. And the question is, what's most being used? What's the best tool to use at your given level in any given company? And so we're hoping today to answer some of those questions. And so before I go on, let me quickly share this and just, Ben, do you want to introduce yourself, say hi to the gang, and call out anything in particular that stands out to you?
Yeah, greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining live. My name is Ben Murray, known as the SaaS CFO. I was an in-house SaaS CFO at founder and private equity-backed businesses, and now a fractional CFO, coach, instructor, podcast, newsletter, all that great stuff. So live SaaS today. And yeah, excited to talk about the tech stack. So Kirk, as you mentioned, my 5th annual, and this started, of course, 5 years ago with just 6 software categories. Now I'm up to 21 plus debt financing, because debt finance is so hot in the SaaS space. So just so many insights, into what's happening in the tech stack within SaaS companies.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there were over 500 participants in this year's tech stack. How does that compare to previous years?
Each year, better participation, so the previous year, about 400 something. This year had about 535, plus some people coming in at the end, which I still need to add. So every year it's record participation. And the demographics, of course, SaaS audience. And then mostly, I'd say, geographic wise, the US, Europe, Canada, and then the rest of the world, because that does influence, what tech people are looking at. And a mix of bootstrapped, but mostly, I'd say, majority probably funded companies, whether in the PE environment or VC environment.
Incredible. Well, let's get into some of these takeaways here. I'm really interested in what you found across those regions, across those tools. So perhaps we can start here with the accounting software takeaway. Tell us a little bit about this. Does this change from previous years? Anything specific to this year? And in general, is this consistent with what you expected, or were there some surprises?
Yeah, with all these categories, there's some with a lot of movement and some are really entrenched. And accounting is one of them, where the past 5 years, it's been QuickBooks, Sage, NetSuite, and Xero dominating the SaaS landscape for SaaS companies. That varies by industry, right? Unlikely you're going to put, say, SAP as your accounting software into a SaaS company. So these are the four players. It's been that way for 5 years, but interesting. Rillet, a new player into the SaaS space. They made a big splash on the survey this year. Then you can see Microsoft Dynamics, and a whole host of solutions. But generally, out of this, core accounting is so important because we're building upon this accounting software. And you can see it's a mix, right? 2 are ERP, Sage and NetSuite, and then 2, you could say, kind of SMB solutions in Xero and QuickBooks.
Sure. Yeah. How did you see with QuickBooks being removed from India? Did you see a change across that year period?
It's slowly, the market share is slowly dwindling. So each year it's interesting, say maybe the same players, but some of those top players like QuickBooks, like the market share is being taken away. And what I see generally with all the founders I work with in SaaS companies in the US, QuickBooks dominated. Outside of the US, it's mostly Xero. It just seems like, just from talking to a ton of folks, and then Sage and NetSuite varies.
Beautiful. Interesting. All right, let's move on to the next one here. We got accounting software by company ARR size. This is a little bit what you were talking about with the size piece. I think this will be a hot topic, and we can hit on some other questions that we've received from the audience later about this in particular, which is really, what does your size have to do with the system you use, and when should I switch? Do I ever switch? So what do you say to that piece?
Yeah, and we can definitely talk about ERP versus point solution. I asked that question in the survey, what's folks' preference? But this is an interesting one because I ask for those participants who want to disclose anonymously their ARR size, because tech changes as you get bigger. And you can see here, looking on the left side, you see those blue bars, which is QuickBooks, so kind of dominating the lower end. But then see that switch from 11 million ARR and above. Of course, QBO is still a big player. Then look at Sage and NetSuite, right? They really jump up. And then 51 million and up, still, NetSuite very entrenched in those large SaaS companies, followed by Sage. So you can see there's a clear change from, less than 10 to over 10. But of course, a lot of different philosophies, ERP versus point solution, because of course, all these fantastic point solutions want you to continue to use, say, a QuickBooks or Xero and ride that, up to 100 million.
Sure. Interesting. So we've got a question here based on that exact point from Mark Baker. He said, at what stage, ARR range, should companies think about switching from Xero or QuickBooks to NetSuite, Sage, etc., for their core accounting solution? You mentioned there that 10 million mark. That's what we're observing. Is that also what you would prescribe?
I think now technology is becoming so good, obviously, that, you can ride these solutions for longer. But I think it depends on the complexity. If you're enterprise SaaS and have 10 customers, making $10 million, just, large example here, then you could probably use QuickBooks and Xero and continue to invoice, out of QuickBooks, but of course, have some sort of RevRec add-on, but if you're 500 customers and sending out, 100 invoices a month and a lot of transactions, a lot of complexity, then you've got to leverage technology, and then it could be a time to think about. But usually 10 million, I think for me, is a big threshold for technology, for staffing up, different things. So.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That was actually going to be one of my questions to you, is you kind of hear this idea that once you've hit a certain dollar threshold, you've breached the gap between sort of what you might consider your SMB tools to your larger tools. But like you said, if you have 100 million and your total contract value is 10 million, and that just means you have 10 customers, does that really mean you need to jump? And so I'm wondering, one of the ways to look at it is the dollar value. Is there other ways to consider jumping from smaller tools to bigger tools? Maybe customer count, maybe size of organization. Have you seen that in the market in your conversations with people? And if so, how common are they?
Yeah, I think that's where the complexity, the volume of data going through your business, that dictates, okay, how much automation do we need? Because maybe QuickBooks is not good at automation and they just launched RevRec, basic RevRec solution, but maybe that's not advanced enough. So I think it's complexity, the volume of transactions, how many invoices are going out the door, the type of revenue streams. Is it subscription? Is it usage-based? Do you have professional services? So that, they're always like, it depends answers here, and again, and also I think if you're enterprise SaaS versus what I call self-service, so small price point, high volume, that's going to dictate. And also, what's our go-to-market motion? As we get into the tech stack survey report, that also dictates how I look at different solutions based on my go-to-market.
I see. Okay, that's good. Let's move on to the next one then, Rich, here. Here we've got invoicing software. I'm not sure too many people are too familiar with some of the smaller ones here, but there are a fair few, more than you might see in the other categories. What does this say specifically about invoicing in general? And again, have you seen any shifts in this across the relative years that we've been looking at for invoicing software?
Yeah. So what this shows is sometimes our core accounting system can handle the invoicing, that $100,000 invoice that we send once a year, no problem. But complexity of invoicing, the complexity of our revenue streams that maybe QuickBooks, for example, not to pick on QBO, I use it a lot, but can't handle the type of invoicing, the volume of invoicing that we need. So you can see, of course, we have QuickBooks, Sage, NetSuite, Xero still in there, but now, of course, we're integrating Stripe. We've got Maxio, a big subscription management player, ChargeBee, Rillet, and so on, where now in our accounting software, it just can't quite handle our use cases. So now we do need that add-on solution that integrates into our accounting to then handle the invoicing.
Sure. Is there a point at which you'd say, this is the time to add that software because it's become too complex? Is there a transaction number?
I think it gets to transaction volume. If you're enterprise, a couple invoices a month, you may be okay. But now, I'm sending 30, 40, 50 enterprise invoices a month. That's getting to be a lot. I've got to handle the renewals. I've got expansion deals coming in that then affect how I'm invoicing current customers. So I think volume dictates a lot the type of revenue that we're invoicing, to determine, and then that might be 10 million, but maybe we got to think around 5 million ARR. Maybe it could be less because we need to put that foundation in place earlier. So these are a lot of the major players in this, and a lot of these solutions could wrap under a general subscription management category, but that's such a broad bucket, and there are distinct functions that we have to focus on within subscription management.
I see. Now we've got a question here from Tom Fink. It kind of references the last section here, but I think it applies to other sections too. So right now it says we are at 10 million. We're going to get to about 50 in 4 to 5 years. He's asking, would you go straight to NetSuite, or is Sage then NetSuite the right move? I don't want to overwhelm my team by making 2 moves, but you also want to make the right decision. Have you encountered this a lot, Ben, where maybe 2 moves is the right option in stages, but is there a minimum time frame where that 2 moves wouldn't make sense?
Yes, we know switching accounting systems is a pain. I've gone through that. It took me 6 months plus another 3 months of post-live support to make a major accounting transition, plus acquiring companies who are on QuickBooks, bringing them into your accounting software. So I would not suggest a move to Sage and then NetSuite. Really, those 2 competitors, and I try to be partial, but you're one of those, right? Because both are positioning as your long-term accounting solution that has all the ERP functionality, invoicing, reporting, metrics, RevRec, etc. So it'd be looking at one of those solutions. We know NetSuite's been around for a while, but now we've got new players, Sage making a big push in SaaS. Now you've got Rillet, which is a SaaS-specific accounting solution just for SaaS companies, which is really interesting. So I think it's that one move, because it is a lot of work. And I think in that 10 to 20 million revenue range is probably a good time to think about that. And for the CFOs, controllers, and audience, just like R&D has their product roadmap, we need our product roadmap. We've got to plan out how our tech stack is going to evolve. And maybe somewhere towards the end here, we can put the link to my full tech stack report. I've got 21 categories. And thinking about what do we need? How do we supplement? What are we building upon, to build out that evolution? Because we can't all put it in at once.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's jump on then to the next one here. We've got revenue recognition software, complicated matter ever since 606 came into play. What are your thoughts on this one in particular? I see a lot of spreadsheets here, more than the other pieces. What do you think that says about revenue recognition in general as a concept and a gap counting method?
Well, one thing, the biggest competitor to all software solutions, Excel and Google Sheets. I'm an Excel guy, so Excel, a huge competitor here, in a ton of these categories. And with RevRec, you got to start somewhere, right? We're cash basis. Now we have to put RevRec in place. I have a deferred RevRec spreadsheet model that a lot of people use, and we start there. When I became CFO at one company, they were doing, well, not really any RevRec. We started with spreadsheet RevRec, and then we put it into a system. So you've got to start somewhere, but eventually you need a RevRec module. Now, this could be a point solution, for example, like a Maxio integrating to QuickBooks or Xero, or you could be using a module within Sage or NetSuite, for their revenue management. Mm-hmm. So again, you have choices here of RevRec of an ERP or a lot of point solutions trying to grab your attention. But I would say for SaaS, like RevRec has to be bulletproof, right? Our valuation is based on our recurring revenue, and we can't go into due diligence and someone saying, hey, your revenue is off.
Right. So what do you think that says then for the NAs, the 7% of NAs here? That would suggest that they're not even using Sheets. Would that mean that in their particular case, they don't need to recognize revenue, or that perhaps it hasn't even been taken into account?
Yeah, I think a lot of things. One, everybody starts cash basis. So we invoice that annual invoice. We post all the revenue to 1 month, right? Classic cash basis. So we're just not doing it. We're not ready. Usually I say if you're 3 million AR and scaling nicely, it's time to think about revenue management. Yep. But then if you are just invoicing monthly, you can ride that for a long time. And maybe, I don't know if auditors will get really picky at year end. And, if you started a monthly subscription on, December 20th and prorate that. But really, with monthly invoices, it's going to pretty much match what that RevRec will be in the month, other than maybe just a little bit of timing. So I think either people aren't doing it yet or invoicing monthly, and you could ride that for a while.
Totally. Yeah, and we'll put a link to that a revenue recognition spreadsheet that you mentioned, as well as the tech stack report at the end here, so people can have access to that. So now this is a big one. This is obviously our area in terms of drivetrain. The FP&A software has obviously been a huge piece of an ever-increasing piece of the finance and accounting world. Again, spreadsheets is the big player here. There's a lot of Excel lovers, but then there's a lot of other players coming up in the world here. What are your thoughts on this one as it relates to previous years? And then have you seen the field expand or contract specifically with FP&A?
Yeah, obviously drivetrain shown well here, and FP&A is a hot space in tech. I talked to tons of FP&A solutions, and unofficially I tried to, through my SaaS fundraising news site, try to add up all the funding that went into FP&A solutions in the past couple of years, and it was like close to $1 billion. Wow. Like huge, huge investment in the FP&A space. So there are tons of solutions that don't make this chart. But of course, we know, CFOs out there, FP&A, we're using spreadsheets, right? We have our forecast model. I've got my forecast models in Excel, and then eventually we transition. And usually, Kirk, we talk about transitions. Usually I say FP&A software, like above 10 million ARR, it's really time to get serious about this, especially if you're going to exit to PE or you're working in that PE environment where the reporting standards are higher, the turnaround times are more stringent. You put in FP&A software to make your life so much easier, and you kind of, once you've gone through that, you kind of see the light, and you don't want to go back to spreadsheets again to do that year over year change or this or that requires tons of VLOOKUPs and sum ifs. Yeah.
I think FP&A is a unique category in of itself as well, because it's one of the only areas of a finance and accounting team that isn't necessarily mandatory. You don't have to report your forecasts, right? You don't have to do that. It's a nice to have. It's an add-on. And another interesting part of it that stands out to me is pretty much, despite all these categories here, everyone has started at some point in spreadsheets when it comes to FP&A. Whereas you might have started in NetSuite or QuickBooks or something along those lines from a strict accounting, maybe GL accounting perspective. From an FP&A perspective, almost everyone has started in Sheets and then maybe transitioned to a tool, or perhaps if you're part of the 2/3 here, just stayed in spreadsheets altogether. Do you have any thoughts on that combination of the uniqueness of FP&A relative to the other sections?
Yeah, I think it follows the evolution of your finance team because say less than 10 million AR, and then I work with a lot of SaaS companies in that range where we're outsourcing our accounting to a bookkeeper. We absolutely have no FP&A, which is why they bring in fractional CFOs. And, there's no in-house doing finance and accounting. But as you scale, right, all right, we hire an, FP&A. I'm sorry, maybe hire a CFO, then we hire a controller, and we hire some ARAP clerks. Then we get to a point where it's like, hey, as a CFO, I'm doing all the FP&A, I'm forecasting, analysis, due diligence, and then we get that first FP&A hire, which is golden. And then it's like, okay, now let's think about some software in this process. So I think FP&A software kind of follows the evolution of that growing finance and accounting team.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned there that you've seen, almost $1 billion essentially be raised in this space in recent years. What do you think that says about the desire for forecasting? Obviously, it's high. Is this a timing thing where now technology's reached a point where we can really pull out a lot of insights from a forecasting perspective?
It's coming along. I think, forecasting is a must-have, right? If it's a basic cash forecast, if you're a founder just running a forecast versus, all right, now I'm a CFO running a forecast, but you have to forecast monthly or as quick as your data changes for the next 12 months or the fiscal year. And it's just a must-have, right? We have to have that visibility. All the investments that are going into our SaaS company, people, resources, software, we have to know the output of that. So forecasting is just fundamental to that finance process. And again, you can start in spreadsheets, but eventually you do need to move into software because just the demands are so high as you get bigger and the turnaround times and the complexity. Maybe now we have 10 product lines to forecast versus 2, and I could handle that in spreadsheets. So just the demands increase.
No doubt about it. So since we're on the topic of FP&A, we have a poll here for everybody that's watching that's FP&A specific. If we could put up this poll here, you can see, first of all, it's asking, is anybody interested in a personalized demo of Drivetrain? If you haven't already heard about us, we are a third-gen FP&A tool that focuses on not only being a centralized source for a lot of your systems that we've previously listed before this and above, but then also being able to take those sources, create custom metrics in a way that makes sense for your business, and then forecast them out with all the appropriate reporting, both from a graphical perspective, tabular perspective, but really being that source of conglomeration and source of truth for a centralization point where we can forecast from. So if we've got that poll, we can move on from there. And then here we've got our metrics reporting software. This one, I'm sure there's a broad range of what falls into metrics reporting. Is there anything here to call out that's different than the rest?
Yeah, so it's funny. This was actually the first year for this question, which I can't believe I didn't ask it earlier because all I do is talk about SaaS metrics. But an up-and-coming category, we know we need SaaS metrics to manage our business, to scale our SaaS companies successfully. And still, this is a very green category. Of course, spreadsheets dominating. And the hard part here with metrics, right? We're pulling in revenue data. We're pulling HRIS data. We're pulling in revenue data. All this different data that it resides in different systems. So that's why you see spreadsheets dominate. And of course, Drivetrain up there at the top for that next solution. But again, I'd say this category right now, I think is going to change a lot over the next couple of years. You have a mix like Power BI, right? Just your standard BI tool, compiling data, but then you have like a SaaS grid that's just focused on SaaS metrics. So some are actually, I'll call the engines, the calculators, while others are just aggregating the data, so a lot of mix here. And it just depends on where you want that to reside and how much you want that application to do for you to create metrics for you.
I see. So, at this point, we've shown a variety of different types of softwares and tools that you could use. And it's probably apt. I've got this question here from Jody Rudolph. It says, we've ended up having many systems, multiple instances of QuickBooks, Xero, Zoho Books because of acquisitions and new subsidiaries. Do you have any thoughts on consolidating these systems or continuing with point solutions? So I really think it's like a consolidation versus point solutions question there. Given all the solutions that are offered, do you have any thoughts on that, on maybe when is the right time, or if there isn't ever a right time to consolidate / use point solutions?
Well, I think in this case, very accounting specific. Yeah, if you've got multiple instances, you got QuickBooks, you got Xero, then yeah, I think it's time to think about your overall plan. Let's bring this together. Now you probably do need that ERP accounting software, so you have multi-entity, multi-currency, because I wouldn't want to be logging into this QuickBooks instance and this QuickBooks instance and then exporting that to something, consolidate my financial statements. So now's the time, I think, to think about consolidating that. So on accounting side, a big fan of that, right? I would like that in one ERP system. But then, say an FP&A tool, you could still then, integrate that into your ERP software, because now, say you have FP&A or some sort of solution, now I've integrated to QuickBooks instance, this instance, now I've integrated to Xero. So accounting, I think you should bring it together.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. So we got our final category right here. This is tax software. And this one, a little bit more of a pie with, sort of wider slices. And this could be seen as a little bit different than the rest too. Typically, tax can be separated out as its own group. The Big Four have it as its own group, for example. Any thoughts on this one in particular? A lot of names here we haven't seen in the other categories.
Yeah, so I put this one, a little different, maybe not as sexy, but now it's coming up more and more. And just being now, before it was like just locally compliant with sales tax, now being globally compliant. And what I find is, of course, not a surprise, and it makes a ton of sense. Founder, we just kind of stick our heads in the sand. We kind of forget like any sort of sales tax compliance here, because traditionally software and tangible product, hey, there shouldn't be tax on that. We know, I won't get on my soapbox in the US, but just the complexity of sales tax compliance in the US is so hard. And now thinking global. So I threw this in here just to think about this, some of those major players, how it's being handled, that at some point this has to be on your product roadmap, because it will come up in due diligence. If you're going to fundraise, if you're going to exit, right, they're going to ask, where do you remit sales tax?
Sure.
Why don't you remit in these others? So they're expecting work papers, supporting documentation on your whole sales tax process. So I threw this in. It's a big headache, but it's a must-have headache.
Well, that's good to know. I'm wondering, since this is our last category here, in the future, what other categories are you expecting to add? Do you foresee that one category will explode more than others? Maybe the new FP&A where billions of dollars of investment are coming. Is that out there? Or is this set that you have a pretty standardized list and we can expect that to be, consistent year on year?
Like I said, I started this survey 5 years ago because founders were reaching out, like, what should I use? Should I use QuickBooks? Should I use this, this, and this? And like, hey, I'll pull my audience. So now we're 5 years in, 21 software categories from 6, and expands by probably 2 to 3 categories a year, because there's so much overlap with the back office, with finance, with HR, that CFOs have to be involved, have to be at the table, of the overall tech stack within the company. So coming up next year, I always get suggestions on different things. This year, I added SaaS metrics reporting, contract management, I think, debt financing, and one more. And next year, probably maybe some sort of AI tool or AI category, and then probably revenue intelligence. This is a newer category around our sales data, our CRM data, of course, focused on selling into the sales org, but finance, heavy user of sales and CRM data. So I could see usually probably now 1 or 2. And a lot of these, right, these aren't in control of the CFO, but they overlap or are influenced, are used by the finance team. So probably a couple more categories next year.
So that revenue intelligence piece, I'm guessing that would be typically coming out of the RevOps team?
Yeah, it could be coming out of RevOps, sales ops, just your sales team in general, and trying to dig into all your CRM data, to figure out not only just better reporting, but then the prediction around your pipeline, around your forecast that we know as CFOs, we need to then feed our forecast model with, new customer acquisitions, ACVs, ARR dollars that are coming in each month.
Beautiful. Now, I want to get to a couple of the questions here from the audience. I got one from Alan Wang. He submitted when he registered. He said, how does one decide a budget for software purchases? And I'm guessing this means of any kind. But obviously this is a tricky one. Maybe you could break it down from categorizations for us, because obviously this is another one of those it depends questions. What have you seen as typical right answers based off of companies that are hitting different pieces of ARR?
Yeah, its budget is tough because I think one, it depends on the scope of the applications, so FP&A is a good example. A lot of FP&A players, some are made for more founders, more of those basic users. So the scope of that application is smaller and the price point is a little bit smaller. But then an FP&A solution that, say, as a CFO, I'd like to use, I need a little bit more complexity, sophistication, integrations that may, require a higher budget for that. So I think, how much impact does this have on your org? One, the value that it provides, or is it just a departmental tool, that no one else sees? So it just depends. But one example that I can bring up a lot is revenue management and RevRec. Because I work with a lot of founders, teams that don't have, doing cash basis, and then they go look at revenue management solutions, invoicing solutions, like, whoa, look at that price tag. Maybe it's 30, 40,000. It's like, boy, that's a lot. But think about the impact on your org. Like revenue management, RevRec has to be perfect. And it may sting now as a 5 million ARR company, but think when you're 15, 20, 25 million, you can still be using that solution and it's going to pay for itself in just less pain, better reporting, passing audit easier down the road.
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of the times I hear CFOs with the dilemma in their mind: do I hire or do I pay for a solution itself? In which category of the ones that you've listed do you think that the solution provides the best sort of replacement, or at least offsetting, of the needing to hire somebody?
Yeah, I've kept a relatively small finance team when I was an in-house CFO and added tech to it, where, so yes, technology, of course, I'd like to employ more people in, your local community, but technology can help you scale and be more efficient, and you don't have to hire, so things like FP&A, analysis, forecasting, making that easier, invoicing management, subscription management, right? Because one AR clerk or AR staff can only handle so many invoices and renewals and new closed won opportunities coming into your accounting system. So where you have volume of data, like invoicing, that's where you can save a lot, by implementing technology, and it just pushes off the hiring down the road until you get bigger.
Beautiful. So I've got one here from Rudolph. It says, do you have any suggestions for a software that marries ERP and CRM system data, a sort of orchestration layer that gathers and aggregates, joins revenue, costs, and headcount data? Maybe just quickly, I can give an answer to that one, because here at Drivetrain, we actually do that as our main goal. The goal is to sort of combine the ERP and the CRM data to create a cohesive model that combines not only your 3 statements, which are of course integrated, but everything from sort of your pipeline all the way to your predicted translation of that pipeline into deals, which would of course be new ARR, to everything that would feed sort of your headcount model and planning for different scenarios of headcount modeling. A rapid hire a scenario, maybe a less rapid hire scenario as well. That would be my response. I'm obviously slightly biased towards Drivetrain. Ben, do you have any thoughts on that as well, in terms of good orchestration layers between any of the tools, really, but even to Rudolph's point here?
Yeah, I thought the question is going somewhere else, but yeah, if you're talking, I need to pull in all this different data and slice and dice it. Yeah, that's where FP&A solutions, right, integrate into your CRM data, your accounting data, into your payroll data, etc., and to bring that data to analyze it and do something with it. I kind of thought the question was going more quote to cash, where it's like CRM integration into accounting, which is also a very big deal for accounting teams. So yeah, you've got the FP&A side, and then, right. What are you trying to do with that data? Or is it more transactional, or is this more on the analysis side?
Sure. Beautiful. So on that order to cash piece, what are the main challenges you've seen typically CFOs or controllers face, where these are the biggest bottlenecks or roadblocks, and how systems can help solve those roadblocks or bottlenecks?
Yeah, I think, quote to cash is kind of that CFO utopia to just make that order process efficient, right? So, your sales team closes the deal, close one, and think about the old days of like, you almost have to kind of walk that contract down to accounting. Of course, it could be in an email now, but it's like, hey, accounting, I just closed this deal. Now enter this into your accounting system, into your subscription management software. So we got to open the contract, enter stuff, maybe create a customer, so a very inefficient process if you have a high volume of orders coming through. And now quote to cash, right? We integrate CRM into our accounting system. So now that data flows seamlessly and we have all the data pushed into accounting, our subscription management system. And now we just set up the subscription. We can invoice, set up the rev rec, so it's just much more efficient process when we reach, again, a volume threshold that we just can't keep up with all the manual keying and maybe the errors that introduces.
Fair enough. Now, here's an interesting one that I actually have never heard before. I've got this from Kartik Arora here. Can companies restrict a particular software for some specific customers and another software for a set of other customers? Is that practice even recommended? Have you heard of that?
No, I wonder if they're talking like internal use software where I restrict it to a group of users, which of course you can do, or are you talking about your customers? So I'm not quite sure there as far as, I mean, right. We know usually all software has permissions they can set up.
I would imagine as well that could be related to regional breakouts, perhaps such as in India where QuickBooks is no longer offered. Having Zoho Books may be what you need to offer your customers there versus in the US, you may have QuickBooks, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think in just a general, permission, security, very important, especially with FP&A software, different types of solutions that's part of that, buying, vetting process,
Sure. So I see a couple of RevRec ones here. One of these maybe you can touch on. One from Kushal that says, our revenue recognition is spread over 6 to 9 months. Which software can help for this? Another one says, does the RevRec Excel sheet that you were talking about before deal with usage or overage? Those two pieces there, does anything come to mind with those two, Ben?
Yeah, whether you have to do RevRec 6, 9, 12, 24 months, if this is subscription software, then of course, there are a lot of solutions out there that can handle that on the subscription management side. So, you just now need to go look and see. And again, that's where looking at your go-to-market process is important. Is this self-service? They swipe a credit card, then that data has to feed something, or is this closed one? Now accounting has to invoice. That kind of dictates of what rev management solutions I'm going to look at that they can handle my use case. So there are a lot of players out there that can handle that. And then my deferred revenue spreadsheet, it's set up more for subscription, so posting periods, subscription start and end dates, but I'm sure like Excel, of course, can be modified potentially for usage-based.
Beautiful. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then I go on here, it says from Timothy, it says, why do we recommend layering solutions as opposed to hiring an analyst or two that can live in the underlying analytics / data warehouse? So I guess the question is tool versus people. When is the trade-off the right move? Maybe even by category here, because I can imagine it would change.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think, say as an analyst, and I came up through the ranks of FP&A and all right, I've got to pull data from my accounting system, now my CRM system, now I've got to pull HRS data, and again, it gets to volume. If I have to do all these data pulls and then someone updates that data, I've got to pull the data again, I've got to run my process again. That's when we have to start thinking about, do we need a solution in between, like an FP&A solution, a data warehouse, a BI solution that's pulling this data for us, that makes our job easier? Because then that's the whole thing. You just get bogged down in data pulls, spreadsheet manipulation, pivot tables versus actually doing analysis, right? That FP&A age-old question of having more time on analysis versus just wrangling the data.
Is there a cost perspective, I wondered, to that as well, Ben, where, some of these tools, maybe they're $20,000 to $40,000, but no analyst would ever be paid $20,000 to $40,000, it'd always be a higher cost to that. So while the analyst could add, substantially more insights because it is in fact a person as opposed to a tool, the cost piece could come into play as well.
I think, yeah, the cost piece and hiring more versus a solution, and just the needs of your board, your executive team, investors, right? We, as CFOs, we have to keep pace with that. If we can't, we start losing credibility, so we have to think about the demands of the organization and how we're going to serve that, because we are kind of that service partner, that finance partner who's helping the org, helping departments, helping executives, to help facilitate decisions. So that's, budget, of course, but then the demands of the org could outpace that.
Fair enough. Okay, I got another one here for RevRec, hot topic today. It says, in order to improve the RevRec, do you have any insights regarding billing systems for SaaS B2B companies?
Yeah, so please download. I mean, we looked at that invoicing chart, so please download my tech stack report, because generally these are now, like, I came from the old school days where now maybe it was an invoicing solution, then we had a RevRec solution over here, but again, different functionality. Now subscription management solutions bring those together. So if I was going to purchase a subscription management solution, it'd have to have invoicing, it'd have to have RevRec, it'd have to have handle my capitalized commissions now under 606. So yeah, if you're B2B SaaS, yes, there are tons of solutions now that handle that. Maxio, Zuora, Ordway, Rillet, on and on ChargeBee, so they're out there.
Beautiful. Well, I've got one here for me, in fact. It says, one from Ethan, it says, the functionality mentioned on Drivetrain's features for marrying ERP and CRM data sparked my interest. How would I go about learning more about Drivetrain and what the platform has to offer? If you go to drivetrain.ai, for anybody in the call, you can learn a little bit about what we do, the tool specifically. And if you'd like, you can request a demo there. That's one of the other hats that I wear at Drivetrain, so you get to see my face again and we can talk face to face. If not, there'll be some good videos there, and be sure to check out our blog. On the topic of our blog, we recently just talked about an article where the FP&A team and working with other teams seems to sometimes have a disconnect. There's the accounting team and there's the FP&A team, and sometimes they don't always overlap in terms of communication. The FP&A team might forecast at a higher level or a lower level than what the accounting team is reporting at. What's your recommendations to teams that want to sort of promote a little bit more teaming together across those various different finance and accounting departments? What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because one, I would say it's like, what are the demands of our board, our executive team, our CEO founder? How are they wanting to manage the business? How do they look at the business, the data? That dictates for me how I need to organize the data internally as a CFO. So what data they want to make better decisions? All right, now let's look at our accounting setup. Let's look at our chart of accounts. How are we coding revenue? How are we coding expenses? What's our department structure? Do we have a business unit structure? Do we have headcount that's dedicated to different product lines? And that dictates our accounting structure, HRS coding, which always goes astray once we get big enough. No fault of HR, because people are always moving around. So, we have to look at a high level on those demands, those requests on the finance function, and then coming back to our org, coming back to accounting, coming back to FP&A, and how is our data structured? And can this handle it? Or where do we need to go with that? Because we have to get more granular as we scale. Classic example, SMB versus enterprise. If we're calculating SaaS metrics, we can't combine that data. That tells us nothing. We have to look at SMB CAC payback period example versus enterprise CAC payback period. So accounting structure, data structure, really important.
Beautiful. Now, I've got one here from Tammy Johnson for you. We were doing a rapid round here for you, Ben. So sorry about all the questions. But it says, what software do you recommend for allowing clients to purchase subscription services that can be prorated? Very unique question there, very detailed.
Yeah, prorated. I mean, that's right part of the sales process. Now, it's in my tech stack report, but there's a whole new category of SaaS spend management software. And before, it was interesting, it was just helping you analyze where are you spending. Now they're helping you buy software more efficiently. So now you have these platforms where you can see what you're spending on, the usage of it, and then they're going to help you actually negotiate better offers with those vendors. And of course, prorating, I think, just depends, when your contract's coming up, this and that expansion. But yeah, that's now the SaaS spend management category that can help you with that.
Beautiful. Makes a lot of sense. Now, in terms of team sizes, specifically when we're looking at something like FP&A, I'm interested, what have you seen as a typical team size, maybe as it's related to ARR, maybe team size of FP&A per 10 million or something to that effect? And when is it a good time to not only add your first member, maybe outside of that CFO that might be typically doing the work themselves in the beginning, and when is it a good idea to expand that even further into, several members?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a hard one to answer. I generally say as you're scaling past 10 up to 15, if you're the CFO doing all FP&A, it's time to hire an analyst. Like that was golden for me. Could hire my first analyst, and that person can do the forecasting, the variances, budgets, slides, board decks. So, 10 to 15 in scaling, that's prime time to get budget approved for an FP&A analyst. And then from there, right, it's going to scale. I've been in so many different orgs, Fortune 20 companies where I was an analyst handling 4 different $30 million business units, so it varies widely and you get into that shared services structure. Or when I was working in the airline industry and we had these major departments within the organization, within an airline, right? We had the pilots and flight attendants, we had maintenance, and then you had analysts dedicated to each of those major departments because you could have 4,000 pilots and flight attendants. That's just, I can't handle that, plus maintenance, plus all these other groups. So then you get into the more of these dedicated business unit model FP&As where you have an analyst per these major BUs or departments. So I think it just depends on the size, the structure of what's happening in that work.
Fair enough. Okay. So I'll give you a break here, Ben. I got another one from me from an anonymous attendee. It says, are Maxio and Drivetrain competitors? We are not. Maxio is actually a tool that we integrate with quite easily. And so we find that we work well with a lot of these tools to not only bring in that source data, which is important, but then use Drivetrain as a base to forecast off of that. So certainly not competitors. Other times I've heard that are things like Power BI, maybe data warehouses as well. We are our own data warehouse and we have our own BI capabilities. What those tools focus on really well is the BI piece, but they don't have a forecasting option. That's the additional piece that Drivetrain adds. So if anything, we link with those quite easily. So here I've got another one from Timothy. Where can I download the tech stack report? Tim, we'll put that at the end here and in the link. We'll also provide any spreadsheets that Ben was mentioning with the link there that you can download those, as well as the recording for this so that anybody who wants to rewatch it can. Here I've got a question from Yashwant. As a CFO, what would be the right time to go for a financing round, although you have sufficient runway? I know you've just been doing a little bit of work on this, Ben. I've been seeing your posts all over LinkedIn about it. A lot of feedback. So here is a time to chat about your findings there.
Boy, when to go for a financing round. I mean, of course, they always say it when you don't need it. And, it's funny. I just sent a newsletter out today to about 60,000 folks in SaaS. And one thing that's been coming up lately I had to mention is sometimes we have little gaps in our cash runway where it's temporary gaps because maybe a big deal pushed out or something happened. And, cash flow is out there. We've got a little timing issue. So one, always recommend a line of credit with your local bank. Usually they offer nice, terms, low admin fees to keep that unused capacity out there, not charge you for that unused capacity. So a little promo for all your the local regional banks, just to have that when you do it now, when you don't need it, because it could come up in the future, just to have that as a safety valve. I had one cost a couple $1,000 a year, just in admin. That was it, just to have a nice line of credit available. Then, right, it depends. Equity rounds, debt financing, right? Debt financing, a hot thing in SaaS companies, doing MR financing to bridge kind of a 2 to 3 year gap of, where it's not long-term debt, going to your SBA. So you have that option plus just equity. So it just depends. What are we trying to achieve with that financing? Do we have to bridge a cash gap? Or do we see, I interview a lot of founders for my podcast. Do we see traction? Do we see product market fit? Do we now need to accelerate the business and we've got to invest more? Or sometimes our product dictates a ton of investment because it's so complex. So it's a hard one to answer, but what are we using it for? That dictates, all right, can this be equity? Or is it a short-term thing? We needed like a 2-year MR debt financing bridge, or again, a line of credit, again, that I always recommend just to have.
Okay, so depending on the need, equity financing might be the right way, or it could just be as simple as a line of credit if it's something seasonal, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I got one here from Marcos Bento. We got 10 more minutes left, so keep those questions coming, guys. It says, what is your experience on software choices for companies that offer consumption-based and SaaS offerings? Does it make sense to have a different software given their differences, or are there solutions that handle both? I can quickly say about Drivetrain that most of our customers will have a mixed revenue base. So they'll have either a consumption or utilization-based piece, and then a true strict SaaS offering. Both can be done at least within Drivetrain itself, and like I said, many of our customers do that. Ben, any thoughts on that piece as well from a consumption versus SaaS offerings perspective?
Yeah, I think, again, it depends. Are we trying to do analysis with this, or is this more transactional where now we've got to use that consumption data to create an invoice to put into our accounting system?
Sure.
So that is a twist, right? Then you definitely need software that fits that consumption-based model. And again, I like to be impartial to software out there, but one that comes to mind is a solution called Meter, M3TER, that sits as that bridge between your SaaS application, takes all that data, compiles it into a presentable, invoice data to then you can now invoice. So yeah,
like
consumption.
A billing item there?
It's like a billing, it sits in between because we know consumption can get very complex, a lot of different, and again, it has to integrate into your operational SaaS application to pull that data out. So yeah, that's where, use case, make sure it can handle that.
Awesome. Now we've got a good one here from Ruben Visser. It says, any best practices on which team / which roles should own the finance tech stack, implementation and maintenance?
So which to own the finance tech stack. So yeah, if we're talking finance tech stack, then definitely that if there's a CFO, if you're the CFO, you own the finance tech stack, right? Or if you're a controller, you own it. So that's where, in your department, what's our accounting? Invoicing, RevRec, sales tax, travel and expense, et cetera, and on and on and on. You own that. But at a bigger level, CFOs have to be stewards of the data in their org. So as you're looking at general applications that affect many departments within your organization, like a CRM system, right, that integrates into accounting, we have to be at the table for those discussions, data changes, anything coming up. So we own our department, plus we have to influence the decision-making within our org.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have one here from an anonymous attendee that says, we are a company where we have 6 companies across the globe. Consolidation of financials is an absolute nightmare for a small company like us. What would be the right accounting tool for us in this use case? Note, cannot afford NetSuite. So if you've eliminated NetSuite from this consolidation process, what would you say, Ben, is the right move here?
Yeah, you're right, NetSuite, I use NetSuite. It does get pricey, complicated. I do hear a lot of people using Fathom comes up where they're taking data out of your accounting systems and then consolidating in Fathom. But again, if you are multi-entity, multi-currency, you may want to look at a switch to say if NetSuite's too expensive now, and then, Sage is another player in the ERP space that's focused on SaaS, so looking at those. And again, of course, there are a lot of accounting solutions out there. Don't want to just name a few, but again, these are the major players within the SaaS space. But it sounds like you need, one ERP to consolidate everything.
Sure. Yeah. Now, another anonymous attendee here. We have a sizable services business implementing our SaaS software, providing trainings, etc. What ERPs provide good professional services automation as well as SaaS pieces, RevRec, etc.?
Oh, wow. Great. Yeah. So in my tech stack, again, I cover a lot of categories. I cover PSA, professional services automation. So think project management, right? And if you have a PS org, right, it takes setup, configuration, training of your customers. That could be a month. It could be 6 months, 12 months implementation. Of course, your PS team needs some sort of PSA software because then that integrates into our accounting invoicing software. So they say, check off a milestone complete. That then triggers an invoicing process within the accounting system. So that tie-in is so important. I was doing on that spreadsheet. It was painful. So if you have a PS org, if 20%, 15% of your revenue is services revenue, absolutely recommend PSA software. Again, you got to work with your PS leader. CFO needs to be involved because those are tight integrations.
Sure. Okay, so now just one from me, Ben, just out of pure interest. Since you are the SaaS CFO and keep track of all of the key metrics that are coming out of the SaaS world, I'm interested. There's been some common ones over the last couple of years, magic number, rule of 40, these sorts of things. Have there been new ones that you've seen recently, maybe the last 12 months, last 6 months, that have come out that have really piqued your interest as a new, unique way of looking at SaaS? Or do you think we've reached this point where the metrics we have are the best way of looking at it? The traditional ARR waterfall and corkscrew calculation is the way that it'll be for life? Or are there new stuff? Where do you think about that?
Yeah, a lot to talk about. Well, so the fundamentals never go out of style. We need our MR schedule. We need our retention schedules. We need bookings data. My blog post today, I talked about the 4 key SaaS finance data sources. It's a must-have, right? So the fundamentals, they're called fundamentals for a reason. They never go out of style. They're part of your FP&A process. So some things, we won't get away from. Retention, gross profit, margins by revenue stream, our OpEx profile, so important to SaaS, that we have those basics in place. And I don't even call them basics, because that sounds too simple, but we need them to manage our business. The next step is our revenue model, our pricing models. We're not on SaaS 1.0 anymore where it's just subscription revenue. Now we've got variable revenue, usage, consumption, transaction. We've got hardware plays. We've got professional services. We have managed services. So that influences how we calculate metrics as well. So if you have subscription plus usage revenue, I just taught this in my course in the last week or two, we have to adjust the CAC payback formula. We have to adjust LTV to CAC. We have to think about how we're calculating our retention schedules. So that's that next frontier to make sure you can't just use those traditional SaaS metrics calculations. Now you've got to adapt them for the different revenue models that we see in SaaS. And then, there you see some new, like Bessemer talked about a rule of X, which is the rule of 40 plus a factor, that sits on top of the growth number. So there are different ones out there. But again, I always say, start with the fundamentals. I've got my 5-pillar SaaS metrics framework that I distribute to my community, teach in my course, use that as your roadmap. And then it's segmentation. Then it's variable revenue. And then, okay, do we have time to think about, the leading edge of a metric that may be applicable and provide more context to our business?
Sure. No, great answer. Yeah, I was wondering if you'd bring up the rule of X from Bessemer there. So we're here at probably our time cap. You can see in the chat, we've listed off Ben's Tech Stack report. We've got my LinkedIn there, Ben's LinkedIn there. We've also got a link to a couple of other different items. We will have this recording available to anybody that wants to rewatch it. Before we go, Ben, any final words about the future of the Tech Stack report or anything you're looking forward to in the next couple of months in the world of SaaS?
Oh, man. Well, again, I'd say one, finance, accounting. Think about your product roadmap. Where are you now? What do you need to serve your own department? Because sometimes, right, CFOs, we get so involved in other departments within the business, in the leadership, we kind of neglect accounting and finance. So we have to retrench. What do we need within our finance and accounting org to serve the needs of our SaaS company? And then what does the greater SaaS company need? And that dictates our product roadmap, and lay that out, for the next couple of years, what that investment is. Start thinking about the business case and the budget, because again, right, to get justifications for budget, the more we start getting it out there, or the more we start having, people think about it so they're not surprised, we can start layering in the tech that we need. And it's so important. It's gotten so complicated in the back office that we need tech to scale.
Awesome. Well, a great way to end it. Ben, thank you so much. For everybody else, if you would like to learn a little bit more about Drivetrain, feel free to message me on LinkedIn or anyone from the team here. Have a great day. Ben, thanks again for joining.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Forward to chatting you on the next one.
Thanks for joining live, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.